Hi, welcome to Every Single Journey, a family life original podcast for singles. My name is Becki. I'm a single girl in my 30s who is passionately pursuing this life God has given me. Join me as we navigate the season of singleness together. Is it a deal breaker if the person you are considering has a different faith than you? Or if they have a similar faith, but not quite the same faith? Is that a deal breaker? Joining us on episode 13 are April.
Hi.
And Mike.
Hello.
April, how important is it to you that the person you partner with has a similar or the same faith?
I think it's crucial to me. I find that when I think of a partner, I think of sharing my life. And I don't want to hold back parts of myself. I want to share everything with my future husband. And I'm already partnered. Like, Christ owns my soul. Like, I gave it to him and he took it and gave me back an inheritance. And so I think in context of this, like, I'm with someone already who's directing and leading my life, and I need someone to come alongside me in that direction. And so if I'm going to get anywhere or be able to do anything, if I'm going with someone who has a different faith than me or doesn't understand me and this huge aspect of my character and nature, or just like my passion and zeal, and if it was all foreign to them, I don't know that they would truly be able to know me because it's part of who I am.
I love that you pointed out that you're already in a partnership with Christ and that you've already given your life to him, and that is so important to you. Because for me, I look at it like, I'm building a life. I'm building a house. Mm-hmm. My foundation is on Christ, and it's on what he says in his word and scripture. And to me, that's such a firm thing that as God continues to lead me and as I continue to build out this life that he has for me, if I choose to partner with somebody who doesn't understand my foundation or the way in which I'm building, I feel like the life I'm building or the house or structure that I'm building is going to become pretty wonky and pretty weird. Or is it even possible, because we're both building from different foundations and in such different ways, that how do we then connect it for it to be firm on that foundation? Mike, what are some of your thoughts?
I agree with everything you guys have both said. I think for me personally, I would have to ask the question, where are my priorities and what is the most important part of my life? And what I mean by that is Jesus and my faith just another aspect of who I am, or does it completely influence me, and does it completely cover every portion of my life and soak through every minute of every day? And if that's the case, which I think is what it means to be a follower of Christ, then how could I pursue a dating relationship or even look into the possibility of marriage with someone who doesn't share not just a big part of my life, but the entirety of my life in some sense? And so I think that's where, like, my answer is the same as it is for you guys. Absolutely, I would be looking for someone who shares the same faith as me. But the reason why is because faith isn't just a part along with many other parts. It's the whole thing. It's such a huge part of my life.
And I think it takes a moment before you know that about someone, right? Like,
yes.
Mike, I'm not going to know that faith is integral to your every breath when I just see you in the store. So I think there's a difference between going on a date and dating and partnering. Like, these are different topics. And so sometimes I think in the past, I have been advised to do a 25 question survey before I even say yes to a possibility. And that feels unnatural to me because, you're not going to know if you're emotionally matched, intellectually matched, if the humor is going to flow. There are so many aspects of who we are as a person that you're not going to know, just when someone's asking for your number or you're asking for someone's number. And so I think having an open heart to people is a good thing if you're feeling a connection. And then as you get to know someone and you're able to flesh out like, hey, values and what's important to you and where do you see yourself in the future? I think that's when these topics of faith and belief and who we are as humans and how we build our life come up. And then in those moments, I think that's where I would see kind of like a fork in the road. And if someone doesn't share my values, if they aren't a Christian, if they're not someone who has a relationship with Christ, I think for my own protection, because I just have one little heart and it's, I'm trying to keep it from being given in ways that it can't like get back, So I think that's where I would have to put the brakes on a relationship, like pursuing something with someone who I know doesn't align, just like I wouldn't pursue someone who maybe their humor just never got me. Like I am someone who loves to find joy in life and loves to laugh. And I was with some old sourpuss who was always grumpy. Like that's not going to work for me. Like I am not going to make them happy. They're not making me happy. It's like we're going to be miserable together or happy apart. So let's go our own ways. So yeah, see you, Mike. That's the exact perfect thing to say. Like in love, Christ keep you. Like, but see ya. And so I think like this is a part of that as well. Like if I'm going to pursue someone, they have to align spiritually to my values and hopes and future, just like they would any other area.
I think that's a really good point that you brought up, and I'm glad you brought it up, this idea of differentiating between going on a date and dating, because as I was thinking through some of these questions, I was thinking, gosh, it's so easy to overcomplicate this stuff and think about what details do we need to align on? What details don't we need to align on? And I think like you just took something that could have been so complicated and make it simple. Like going on a date with someone is getting to know them and getting to know if you see a potential future with that someone. Going on a date isn't like sealing the deal. It's not like this big, huge, it's not, I went on a date, I'm going to marry this person. And so that's just super refreshing that you brought that up. And like, that's not what we're talking about. Going on a date, trying to get to know someone. It's after that. It's once you get to the fork in the road, as you mentioned. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I love how it takes the pressure off. So a little bit of my history. I went on my first date this last Saturday. I'm in my 30s.
Whoa.
I went on my first date this Saturday.
Congratulations.
I'm so curious. I want to know how it went. I have all the thoughts.
That's what this podcast is about.
Yeah, baby.
But
maybe we've got some dates in our future. Like, not together, but like individually. So we're very different ages and different people. Caveat.
Try and get back on track now.
Yeah. Anyway.
Maybe I should have shared that before, but I wasn't really planning on bringing that up. So here we are.
But you went on this date. How did you get there?
so it's interesting to me, all of the pressure that I felt in God's timing and all of this, because never having done this for 32 years is a long time to have not done something, to then go into something with an overthinking brain and being like, I need to make sure we align on all of these different things, whether it's humor or just our general vibe and conversation, or, do we want kids? Don't we want kids? Are we of the same faith? Like, which one do you ask first? Or do you take a breath and take that first date and not ask any of those? Just go and meet the person. It was a semi-blind date, so I didn't know too much about the person. And I say semi-blind because we've texted back and forth a little bit. But it's like, when do I bring those conversations up? When do I bring that faith conversation up? Or do I not bring the faith conversation up? Obviously, I'm probably not going to bring it up on the first date, but like recognizing that it's okay to just take a breath and take a step back and let it flow how it's going to flow, and see, do we even get along enough for there to be a second date? And then as you get to know the person, I feel like something that we all have in common that we've all already shared is ideally the person that's dating me or pursuing me to, I want you to be my girlfriend, or whatever that looks like, is going to know by my actions. Like, do my actions speak loud enough that I'm a follower of Christ and that that's important to me? for that to be picked up on, to even be brought up in conversation. You know what I mean? It's like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like I put so much pressure on myself to have that bigger question of, do we have the same faith figured out before I even get to know the person, that I forget I just need to get to know the person. We're just two humans who have some kind of connection or a similar interest, or in this case, because it was a blind date, our good friends thought we had a similar interest. Let's just go and see what it is instead of putting all of that pressure on. But after we have taken the chance to get to know somebody and we start to get to that fork in the road, what does it look like for us if we discover we don't have that same faith? Are there certain parts of our faith that we're more concerned about aligning and other parts that we aren't as concerned about aligning? Or is it just nope, we have to agree on everything? What are some thoughts on that?
Well, I have thoughts, but I always have thoughts. But I think talking about the pressure first, if we can maybe circle back to that.
Yes, let's do that.
I think that one of the traps a single person falls into is not just thinking, oh, is there something here? Is this especially as a Christian single, is this, as a woman, I'm like, is this going to be my husband? And that is unfair to them. And it's unfair to me, because relationships are built on shared moments. They're built on the small things in life. It's laughs over coffee and deep conversations. And you can't really know someone until you get to know them. And I think that putting all that pressure on someone to act in all of the ways that you have sort of built up idealistically in your head of this person, it's selling yourself short for the potential that is. And so I love that you were willing to take this risk. And depending on how attracted you are to the person, sometimes I'm like, I forgot how to breathe, oxygen in and out, oh, this man is very handsome. I don't know, maybe you guys don't have that problem. But for me, it's I just need to remember that I'm just a person and I'm just meeting someone, and take all the pressure off and be take a breath, girl. This isn't your normal you, and you're not presenting your normal you. So let's try and be normal so they can see if they like you. So I think, just that pressure exists. But I think we need to give ourselves permission to remember we're just people, and this isn't the end-all gauge of our future. This isn't I'm entering a courtship with someone and my dad's got to give him goats or something. This is just a coffee date, or just a luncheon, or just another conversation. So I love the idea of taking the pressure off of dating, because then it opens you up to say yes more and to be yourself and be more naturally who you are. And then the person and you will be able to see, is this going to be a good fit?
I'm taking notes over here. I wrote, be normal.
Be normal.
It's going to be tough for me. I'll try.
Learn to breathe so I can then talk and actually have a conversation with said person.
Well, Mike, you can circle back to the whole fork in the road and when is
boy.
Because I definitely talked a lot about.
That's all right. Fork in the road. I want to start with the not overly complicating things, because I know I have a tendency to do that. I can only really speak to my experience in watching other couples handle that and walk through that. And I think that obviously the more you have in common with that person faith-wise, the easier some of those things will be, the more natural helpmate maybe they'll be to you. I've known people who they're both saved, they're both believers, but they won't attend the same church. So I have to believe that's hard. That's difficult. There must be some theological discrepancies there that are preventing them from attending church together. Or they'll be in one church for a while that the husband prefers, and then they'll go to another church that the wife prefers, or whatever. And so just from being able to see that happen and assume that it's not a great feeling, probably, I would think that the more you have in common, the better. And at the same time, I don't think every single detail has to line up. There are so many things about the Bible that I just don't even understand. And I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, when the Bible says this is what it means. Now, these aren't like primary issues. It's not whether or not Christ rose from the dead. It's these things that they're beyond secondary. You go down to third or fourth or fifth in importance. And it's just those details that probably I'll never find a person that lines up with the bajillion of details in the Bible that we have to think over and determine. But yeah, I think the closer to the top, the specific thing is, the closer to a first importance or a primary importance, probably the more important it is that you would line up with them.
And I think that points us to first our relationship with Christ, because that's our first and primary relationship. Like you said, April, you're partnered with Christ first. And if I've taken the time and the intentionality and just building my relationship with Christ, I can then identify what those top things are for me and know that, like, I want somebody who believes that Christ died for their sins and rose again and has given us that gift of salvation so that we can one day be reunited with him when we pass from this world. And to me, that's a big major thing, where some of those things that fall underneath that, I would agree, Mike, I wouldn't need to necessarily align. And I think that also leaves it open for us to, as we've been talking about, remember that we're human and we're people and we like to connect and we like to converse. And just that gives even more room for just conversation of, maybe my potential partner has a different view on something. Well, then we can talk about it too. Mm-hmm. Like, you can talk about those things you agree on, yes, but like I can also listen and have compassion and understanding for why they believe that and why they think that. And I can also share from my viewpoint why I might believe something different. And maybe one of us will change the view of the other, or maybe we'll never align on that. But like you said, Mike, it's one of those things that's a little bit further down on the importance and of the interpretation of it, rather than for me, like I got to know that you are solid and that Christ is first in your life because you've accepted him as your savior.
Yeah, and I think that as our relationship, as we grow and age, things change. And, there are things that I find liberty in now that I 10 years ago had very strong opinions in a different direction. Or I've had those conversations with friends and family and community where it's like, I don't agree with this particular tenet of the faith, but let's talk about it. And their perspective shaped my place in my heart to open up to what they thought and believed. And so, agree, fundamentals, we never change on. Like, those just deepen and grow, but they stay solid. But there are aspects and tenets of the faith that are subjective and they're up to interpretation. And it's dependent on, like whether I was going to go into one, but I'm not, because like people have very strong opinions about these things. But like, there are just some things that are like, at the end of the day, it's not changing my core relationship with God. It's not changing my understanding that his love and compassion came to me when I was a sinner and I couldn't save myself, and he saved me. And so I think it's like those values that are like pillars, like you were talking about the house, like those need to be the same. And if they're not, then it's going to make everything else harder. It's going to make how you spend your money harder. Like if you find a wife or a husband and they have like this generous heart that wants to give as Christ loved others, and all of a sudden they're giving all the money away, and you're going to be like, excuse me, like obviously there's a place, like you have to pay your bills, but like, that value misalignment can cause some big potential for strife. And especially in dating relationships with physicality and how far you go and like how much bodies are involved, like all of that. Like if you're misaligned in your faith, those conversations are going to be a lot harder, and you're going to have a lot more conflict, and it's going to be a lot harder to connect in your shared values than it is if you have the same faith.
And I think that applies, and I see it most in my friendships. Because like I said, I haven't had really much dating experience, but in my friendships, I have friends that don't have the same faith that I do. We just have different beliefs, but we have enough other things in common that we're friends and we enjoy each other's company. But I've noticed that when hardships hit, and when life just gets hard, we have two very different reactions. And that's just as single people. I couldn't imagine if I was dating somebody or married to somebody and life got hard, because life gets hard. And I've heard marriage is like a magnifying glass. It doesn't get rid of your problems. It can tend to magnify them. If we're having problems and our reactions are completely different, and I'm over on one side standing on Christ and trusting him to get me through it, and the other person is standing on or trusting in what they believe in, whether, it could be themselves, it could be money, it could be so many other different things. It just makes the relationship that much harder to connect in those moments. And we're coming from two such different viewpoints. How do you deepen that connection and not pull each other apart? And so I see it in my friendships as well. It's like these people are wonderful and great people, and we're good friends, but there's almost like a wedge there because we have the different viewpoints and the different beliefs at our cores.
Yeah, and I think the thing about marriage, which is ultimately where I would see a Christian relationship ending, I think that's, well, maybe beginning is actually a better term, is like that's where it would start, was when the marriage started. But like, not only, I fully agree, like not only is it when things get hard, but like life, even if you get married in your 70s, you still might have a decade of time with someone. Life is long, and that's a lot of sharing. And I think my goal for marriage would be that I get so tangled up in the person that I and them join. And so like I wouldn't want to hold back any parts of myself from them. And so them having a belief in God, a love for him, I think it's pivotal. Like it's what I would see as the best option for me, for them, for our future, like for the decisions we have to make. People get sick, and if you have kids, they grow up and move out. If you have a job change and someone wants to move across the country, I think the big distinction I'm trying to make between like the friendship relation and the marriage is like, this isn't something that you can just walk away from. Like if a friend decides to get a new job and move, that's sad and you connect, but it doesn't impact me as an individual the same way the choices that my husband will impact me. And so I have a vested interest to have someone who is seeking wisdom from God, seeking direction and guidance from the Holy Spirit, seeking conflict navigation from the Comforter, like all of those resources that I am desperate for in my own life, like having them in my partner, I think are absolutely essential.
We're all older adults. We're not just out of college or things like that. So sometimes, I don't know if you guys have felt this, but sometimes it can feel like the clock is ticking on finding somebody. And it can be maybe tempting, or I guess just there could be a lot of different emotions attached to if you meet somebody and you connect with them and they are not a Christian. How do we reconcile, and how do we go on and carry through? I'm getting older. It feels like the clock is ticking. I really get along with this person. They're a great person. They don't have the same fundamental Christian beliefs that I do. But what if I date them and then I can have a positive influence on them, and then they just need to come to know Christ before we get married? What are some thoughts and some insights into that whole thought pattern? Or maybe you guys haven't had that thought pattern before, and I'm just throwing it out there because I have, and maybe some of our listeners have. I'm just curious. I know it's a big question full of a lot, but I'm just curious to hear some thoughts on it.
Sure. I have a thought, and I have a story. Not a personal story. But I love that. I think where we're getting this whole idea of sharing a like faith in a dating relationship or marriage is scriptural. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, it says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers." And then it goes on to expand on that. And I love pictures to help me understand things. So what does unequally yoked mean? And I think back to Bible times and after Bible times. We don't do it too much anymore. But when a farmer had a field that they had to plow or they had to prepare for their harvest, they would often find 2 oxen, and they would yoke them together with this tool or this instrument that is fairly inflexible. There's not a lot of give in it. It's almost like if you and a partner that you were working on a project with, if somebody tied a string between the two of your wrists or something like that, where you have to move together. And then imagine that there's one animal who's super strong and is able to do so much work. And then the animal they're yoked to is like this really weak, not in shape cow. And what's going to happen? It's not that the strong animal can do the work of plowing the field and also drag along this 800-pound animal to keep up. It's more likely that the opposite is going to happen, right? The weaker animal is going to be holding back the stronger one. And that's not, 100% always the case. That's just the picture that helps me see, okay, when these two are put together like this, more often than not, the stronger one is not going to be able to reach their full potential. The weaker one maybe can get a little bit stronger, can catch up, but more likely those two are not going to be able to get that field plowed as well as 2 equally matched oxen. It doesn't matter if they're 2 strong oxen or 2 weak oxen. The point is that they're moving forward together. And so for what it's worth, I just like that picture. That helps me understand where the writer of Corinthians is coming from. And then a story is I lived in a fairly large city for a couple of years, and I attended a church, and I got to know the worship pastor there and his wife, and they were telling me once about how they met. And the worship pastor said, I approached my now wife, this girl, before I was a believer. And I said, "Hey, you want to go out with me?" And she said, "I would love to go out with you, but I can't date anyone unless they're a Christian." And so this young man who was really serious about pursuing this young lady started attending church with her family, and he would go week after week, and he would go to their house for lunch afterwards, and they would spend time together. And eventually he did get saved, and he became a Christian, and then they started dating, and then they got married, and now they have a family, and now he's the worship leader for this church, and she plays on the worship team with him. And again, that's not how every story goes. I just thought that was really cool that this young lady took so seriously what the Bible says that she didn't say, "Sure, we can date," and then in the back of her mind she was thinking, "And I'm going to convert you to being a Christian before we get married." She said, "I'd love to date you, but I just can't date someone who's not a Christian. I decided that for myself." And he was serious enough to say, "Okay, well, what's this all about?" And Christ got a hold of his heart, and that's how that ended. So I just think that's a really cool story. I like that alternative to the idea of, I'm going to date this one and convert them all at the same time.
And I think that, like, in your story of the weak and the strong animals tied together, both are potentially going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. Not just the weak one who's going to be slowed down. And, if you had this thing on you, you're going to get chafing. It could lead to sores and wounds, maybe even a septic infection. It could deteriorate the overall health of the strong animal. But the weak animal is going to get hurt too because they're expected to keep up at a pace they can't. So they're going to have sore muscles and they're going to have abrasions and chafing and issues. And so I think the potential to get injured for both animals is pretty strong in an unequal situation. And I love the restraint that this young lady had to kind of, when it was very clearly obvious this person doesn't have shared values and that was an important thing to her, she was able to kind of set a boundary of like, hey, this is not what I do. And in this case, it worked out. It was great. Like the man came to Christ. Ultimately, that's the best thing that could ever happen to someone because it's not just our lives here on earth that matter. It's our eternity that's at stake as well. Yeah. And in situations like this, I think we all have stories that have happy endings of someone who maybe went on a few dates. The guy starts coming to church. The woman starts reading her Bible. All of a sudden, there's this genuine conversion happens. And it's this beautiful thing where they build a life together. I think the potential for injury, though, is equally there in the other stories that we don't often talk about, where someone started dating, then they thought there was this relationship that was built on solidness, and then either months or years later, it crumbles and they realize, oh, this person was more trying to please me than have an authentic relationship with Christ and have an authentic relationship and understanding of who God is. And or they were just such a new believer that it takes time sometimes to figure out your faith and to grow in it and to build those muscles. And so I think the potential for injury is going to be there no matter what. And in some cases, it works out beautifully. In some cases, the little weak animal gets strong or the strong one slows down. That does happen. Also, I think if you're going into this, you have to go into it with your eyes open and know this is a huge potential for me to hurt someone and them to hurt me. And if that's a risk someone's willing to take or they feel like it's leading to authenticity and an authentic relationship, that's something they have to go into knowing that's there. And it's something that sometimes does work out. Sometimes it doesn't. And we all know people who are trying to recover from the heartache and trial of someone who didn't love God like they did and didn't have the same values as they did. And then quickly those cracks started to form into unrepairable places that they had to walk away from. So I mean, that feels like such a downer. But I think that, there is the reality that this isn't an easy road.
For sure.
Like you said, Becki, we're all a little bit older. So even finding someone that doesn't have a ring on, that's your age, that looks like maybe they could be potential, that's a battle itself. So I get the temptation and I get that desire to be everything else aligns. So this one thing, how important is it to me? But I think also, every aspect of who someone is, we could all compromise on things, and there are things worth compromising on, but this one feels like a uncompromisable place to me, just given that it's not just a part of my life. It's, like Mike said, it's the very essence of who I am.
I've been sitting here nodding my head as both of you guys have been talking because I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but I'm also realizing and recognizing that, yes, while it does sound like a downer and heavy, there's also, like we were talking earlier, that taking the pressure off and that recognition that this is one of those things that we're choosing as individuals is not worth us compromising on. And there is the potential for that hurt and for that risk in this area, potentially along with other aspects and areas of our life too, because when you're in a relationship, even just something as simple as friendship, there's always potential for hurt. We're just kind of amplifying that potential for hurt when we know this is a non-negotiable for us and we're choosing to maybe step into that, which is where, Mike, I really like the story that you shared of this lady who set that boundary for herself and stood on that and recognized yes, I'm interested in you. Yes, I would love to do that. But the boundary I have to set is I can't date a non-Christian. And recognizing that can protect us from so much hurt, but it also can propel us to the right person. Even if it may not feel like it in the moment, it could be that person standing in front of us, or it could be somebody else. But just by setting that boundary, we're maybe taking some of that downer and that heaviness off a little bit, and some of that pressure off, and just opening ourselves up to, this is one of my non-negotiables. And at the base, most unemotional part of it all, if they don't align with that, then I don't want to pursue it, which could sound very unsympathetic and very much like I'm not willing to compromise. But sometimes there's those things that you just have to stand on that and not move off from and not compromise on, but also not put yourself in a place to get hurt in that way when you recognize ahead of time it could cause that hurt.
I like the clarity you brought to that. This idea that there are non-negotiables, or like values that we hold so dear that we can't compromise on. And no, I think part of that is knowing yourself, knowing what you value, knowing what places you are unwilling or just are so dear and true to you that they're part of who you are. And then being honest with that with potential dates, and as the conversations evolve and as things are coming up, like being really authentic and true is imperative. And it does take the pressure off, because it's not like judging another person. It's just knowing yourself and knowing like, hey, this is something that's super important to me. I have friends that had alcoholic parents, and so like not drinking is a non-negotiable for them. Like they're like, I will not have alcohol in my house. And so like being able to talk about that with a partner and being able to say like, listen, I understand you may have these values, but for me, for my own history, I'm not going to do that. And then I have other friends that are like, no, if you won't drink, that's a non-negotiable, like we have to live the wine of life, like I got to be able to go to a wedding and celebrate with the bride, And so I think knowing where you are, knowing your values, knowing, and then being able to talk about them and then have honest conversation, and then find those places where you either align or can compromise if it's something that you feel is compromisable. But if it's not, then they're not going to make you happy, and you're not going to make them happy, probably.
Thanks for listening to episode 13 of Every Single Journey. If you've liked what you've heard, click the subscribe button to be notified when future episodes are available. You can also share this podcast on your social media pages so others can be encouraged too. If you're looking for more faith-based content like this, be sure to check out Family Life's other original podcasts, including If That Makes Sense, Therese Talk, 10 Minutes With, and the Parable Podcast. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Your financial gifts make podcasts like this possible as we seek to share the hope we have in Jesus. You can find out more on our website at familylife.org.